One of the cool things about running Bulletproof is that sometimes I get access to cool new technologies. I have in front of me the 8th ever CPO-850 thermal in a white box. Now you might wonder, what the heck is that? And I did too, except my friends at Cuisinart, who did not pay for this video, by the way, they just sent me one of their new top secret R&D models and said I could take a video of it. So this is just because I'm a coffee geek and not because anyone's trying to get me to sell their stuff. This is a precision brew, basically to do a pour over at home without having to do the work of pour over. And if you're like me and you do pour overs, you take something like this, you put a filter in, you get a special kettle, and you kind of slowly drizzle coffee for 4 minutes if you do it perfectly. Well, that's 4 minutes you don't get back, even though it's kind of meditative and I enjoy it. When you're running around, like I do with a couple kids in the morning, if you can have a way to just do this automatically, it's kind of cool. So this is something I've been looking forward to getting because it lets you control the water temperature pretty precisely. And you know it's legit because it's a double stapled, photocopied manual. Like, this is pretty much the skunk works of coffee, because Cuisinart's a pretty big coffee company, and I was kind of stoked they sent this to me. Did you notice that? I had inner spiral, and I pinched the box in order to get this off with my feet. So this thing looks pretty cool. Yikes. All right, I'm seeing a thermal carafe here. So here's the deal with coffee makers. You either have a glass carafe, which is pretty nice, or you have a thermal carafe. With a thermal carafe, it keeps the coffee hotter and it doesn't singe the coffee from the bottom, but you got to preheat the thing, otherwise it's going to make your coffee cold. So in order to do this, what I would do, assuming there's no heating element in there, which there could be, is I would just run some hot water in this. So because I care about these kinds of things, I'm going to rinse this out, because you should always rinse new coffee makers. And then I'm just going to leave the hot water in it to sit while we start figuring out how to make coffee on this thing. It's going to be kind of cool. I haven't read the instruction manual, so let's see what happens here. There's no heating element in here, so what this is basically a big thermos. So you can make a pot of coffee using a pour-over method, and I think it's going to be pretty good, but we'll see. I did chat with the R&D team at Cuisinart a couple times when I was talking about what I thought would be really cool to make awesome coffee at home. Inside this thing, yep, this is one of the tricks. It's a small filter. I don't know if you can really see that. It's basically a perforated, very fine steel mesh, similar to what you'd see in a gold filter, but it looks like it's probably laser cut. It's got some tiny little notches cut in it. And what this does is just lets all the coffee oils come through. And when you're doing a pour over by hand, you carefully pour the coffee into this. So what we're basically doing is saying, instead of doing this by hand, the machine's going to do that. And instead of heating the water the way most machines do, they heat it to about 175 degrees, which is not enough to make good coffee. You want somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 degrees Fahrenheit. This machine actually gets the water hot enough to brew really good coffee. So now this thing is, well, I preheated it and I'm going to use it to put water in. In fact, I'm not going to. I'm going to pour water in using this so I can pour cold water in. The Bulletproof mugs conveniently have laboratory markings because they are laboratory beakers. Technically, I should wash this thing out, and I will, but I'm just too excited. I got to try this. Got some ground coffee. You'll notice that, like a true engineer, I haven't read this, so I'm not exactly sure how this is going to work, but this is how unboxing should be. I use the right grind for a pour over, which is basically a medium to medium fine. And I also use a coffee mill. Coffee mill is important. You can get a variety of them. I've used for years the Cuisinart coffee mill because it's reliable and it lets you change the settings very easily, and it's pretty affordable. So what you do is you grind the coffee with a mill, because a coffee mill allows you to to make similar size pieces of coffee, when you use the little $10 choppers, you get basically boulders and dust. So the dust messes up your coffee. And what you want to do here without a paper filter is you don't want the dust to come through into the coffee. So what I'm going to do is turn this around so you can see it and see if I can bend myself around to see it as well. Plug it in, put in the carafe, and see what happens with this interface. I'm going to say temperature hot, medium strength. That sounds about right. And the idea that you can change the setting from hot to, let's see if I can find the menu here. Here we go. Menu, clock, clean cycle. You can change the temperature from medium to bold, which will probably overbrew coffee, and most coffee makers it does. I haven't tested this one out yet. Mild, which is just a waste of coffee. So I tend to look for medium to start, and if you like your coffee really rich or you're looking to conserve, you can use less coffee in a bold brewing, but you're going to get more bitterness that way. It's not what I necessarily recommend. And the temperature of the water could be hot, extra hot, and those are your two choices apparently. I thought they'd have a medium on there. I'm actually going to go for extra hot on this because you want the coffee to be real temperature instead of that 175 kind of thing. And I'm going to hit brew. In about, 4 or 5 minutes, I'm guessing. In fact, I'll tell you how long that's going to be. We should have a cup of coffee and stand by for taste testing. It looks like it's just about done. You can hear the final water coming through. Now, during the time that this was brewing, I actually read the manual a little bit, and there's a couple things. Number one, it already comes on Specialty Coffee Association of America approved settings. Most coffee makers aren't SCAA approved. It's actually really hard to do. I've looked into this. So the appropriate settings are medium strength with hot temperature. And I told it to go hotter because I figured they'd adjusted it down for what the average coffee maker does. I was wrong. It was already set right by the SCAA people. So I probably overbrewed this a little bit. Second thing, I already knew this was Bpa-Free because when I talked with the R&D team at Cuisinart, I'm like, I wouldn't even want to test it if you're going to have BPA coming in contact with the coffee or with the water. And all the plastic parts in here that come in contact with water or coffee are BPA-free, which is pretty cool. The other thing is, found out it has a charcoal filter cartridge, at least it's supposed to, and you pre-rinse it, but because this is a prototype, it's either not in here or, yeah, it's in the bag somewhere. There we go, it's done. The interesting thing about charcoal filtering is that if you use tap water to brew coffee, which you shouldn't do anyway, you're gonna scale up your coffee maker and you're gonna have still not very good coffee. If you have a charcoal filter, it's going to take a lot of the chlorine out and your flavor will get much better. In my case, well, I take activated charcoal and make the Bulletproof Upgraded Charcoal because it helps to filter stuff inside the body, but everything in my house comes from a well and then goes through a giant activated charcoal filter anyway. So this water that comes out of the tap is better than you can drink even when you buy bottled water in a lot of stores. So that's what I use to brew. And some people like to use distilled water. I'm not a fan of that, but it doesn't fill up your coffee maker. So this is the first test, but the proof is in the pudding, which is, how's the coffee going to taste? I'm going to try it black. These are, of course, Bulletproof Upgraded Coffee beans, and well, I'm tempted to blend it with butter and brain octane, but I already had 2 cups of Bulletproof today. I normally just have 1. Wow. I'm kind of impressed. What I normally brew with when I don't have time to make like the brew code kind of technology coffee with either espresso or with the brew code prototype machine. What I normally brew with is typical, just a normal coffee maker, and the coffee that comes out is never that good, but it's good enough to serve a dozen cups right away, but it's not right. This tastes exactly like when you make it using a pour over. And the idea of brew code is really important. This is something that we do at the Bulletproof Coffee Shop and something that I do here. We start out with the bulletproof process, which is how the coffee is cultivated, especially how the coffee is processed. We actually put in infrastructure to change green coffee processing to eliminate fermentation. There's literally these 3 big white pipes where we move the coffee beans across the tanks where other coffee sits and basically spoils for a day or 2 in a fermentation process that cuts costs. We avoid all that, and we have specified drying steps. And then, of course, we do the lab testing that Bulletproof is well known for, to have a multi-mycotoxin screen to avoid these toxins that are well known in coffee. They're so well known that almost every first world country, except the US and Canada, have laws in place to protect their population. The European Union recently tightened up its laws because this toxin in coffee is such a problem. There are no limits protecting you in the US. So what happens is coffee that's illegal to sell in Japan or China or the EU makes it here, and then we drink it. It can taste good, but then you get jittery and cranky and you don't feel so good later. So what we do with all of that precision then is we define the brew code settings. When you go to the Bulletproof Coffee Shop, we have a machine similar to this one, and what it does, it lets us, with very precise scientific precision, put in every step of brewing. What temperature is the water? How quickly does it come in contact with the coffee? How long does it sit? Do we agitate it with air bubbles and things like that, so that our coffee hackers, the people who make the coffee for you, can make the coffee with every single step right? When you're using a coffee maker like this that's SCAA approved, and by the way, the official name of this is the Cuisinart Pure Precision Pour Over Thermal Coffee Brewer, CPO-850. But when you're using something SCAA approved, you're getting a lot more precision from your brewing, and getting precision there means that you get a predictable cup of coffee. I'll tell you, we put a lot of engineering into the process of coffee before it even hit the roaster or before it hit the laboratory for testing. You might as well put the same precision into brewing your coffee, and it's pretty amazing what happens when the water temperature is high enough to brew the coffee properly. You can do a lot more hacker things by controlling the pre-infusion time if you're going to spend thousands of dollars in your kitchen, or you're going to go to a coffee shop that does something like this. But in the meantime, if you want to do this at home, I'm pretty impressed with my first cup. I'll use this for a while and get back to you and see how I really like it. And thanks to the R&D team at Cuisinart, number one, for asking me about what would be interesting in a coffee maker and taking that into account during the design process. I'm actually honored to have been asked by like a giant company like that for my opinion, to have it heard. And also for sending me one like number 8. I should have asked like Mr. Cuisinart to sign it, if there is such a guy. Have an awesome day. I'm going to enjoy the rest of this coffee and stay up all night long if I do.